What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So it is finally the week of the college football playoff, and I could not be any more excited to get into these games, do full in-depth breakdowns on the playoff matchups. In this case, the Alabama versus Cincinnati game in the Cotton Bowl down in Dallas at 4 p.m. this Friday, New Year's Eve. So a few weeks ago, I did a quick overview video on the preview of my initial thoughts of each matchup for the playoff, both Alabama, Cincinnati, and Georgia, Michigan. And those are more broad, initial thought preview, kind of a quicker video there, and doesn't give a score prediction or anything like that. This will be a little bit more detailed video, going over a little bit more specifics and a little bit more updated information now that we're closer to the start of the game. But if you are interested in just seeing more commentary about those games or checking out what I had to say back then versus now, be sure to go check out those videos. I've already recorded the Georgia-Michigan breakdown video, and it ran a little bit long, so I will try to get this one done a little bit quicker, but I want to make sure that I hit everything that I think is going to come up and be important. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead. I'm going to give a score prediction on this one at the end of it. So let's go ahead and get right into the breakdown. And let's start with the Alabama defense against the Cincinnati offense. So to me, by far the biggest storyline here is the Bama corner situation going into this game. They're not going to have Josh Jobe, which regardless of how Alabama fans have felt about Jobe as of late at corner, that is a huge loss. You lose a veteran corner who has been a starter for multiple years and when healthy has proven to be an elite level player in corner, who this year has just kind of had to play through some injuries, which I think is largely why he has struggled some. But he is still a very, very good corner and definitely a big loss. Then you add in that backup corner, Marcus Banks has left the team and is transferring. You can already start to see a corner issue beginning to form. But we're not done. You also have to factor in that Bama could still be without Malachi Moore, who has been out or at least rarely seen the field in the past few weeks due to a supposed lingering injury. I've heard rumors it's a back injury. I don't know for sure, but his status is uncertain for this game as well. And Brian Branch has filled in for him, and he has performed very well. To say the least. He has done very good. But Malachi Moore is still a difference maker and a high-level player for them in the secondary. Then you have the issue of Jalen Armour-Davis, who is another starting corner. He's been out the last 2 weeks, and he's trending towards being able to go, but there's still uncertainty as to if he can play, and then even if he is cleared to play, how close to 100% is he? Is he 60%? Is that good enough for you at that point? So, lots of issues there at corner that you can run into very quickly. Now, assuming that Armour-Davis can go, Bama will have him and then the freshman Kool-Aid McKinstry, as he's called, starting at corner for them. And he's a five-star freshman. He's done absolutely outstanding this year. He is still just a true freshman, so I don't want to go around and call him like an elite lockdown corner, but he looks the part. He's done absolutely amazing. He looks very, very good. And that's a solid 2 starting corners for them. But the depth beyond that would be frightening for them. You're playing with a guy in Armour-Davis who's playing on, or at least coming right back off of an injury, so he's likely not 100%. You have a true freshman at the other corner, and then after that, your depth is almost gone. And that could be very, very frightening because Alabama has already shown some secondary issues this season, mainly coverage bust and things like that, more mental mistakes. But still, Alabama's defense holds itself to a higher standard than that, and that can be a very concerning point for them going forward. And if Armour-Davis can't go, then all of a sudden the situation could begin to look a little rough at the corner spot where you have a true freshman in McKinstry starting, and then after that it's kind of an unknown at that point. Somebody, regardless, it'll be a guy who hasn't seen the field much, if at all, at that point, or you're going to be playing a guy out of position, and that could be a major, major factor in this game. Something definitely to keep an eye on and watch coming into this game. I'm sure we will only learn more as the game gets closer to starting. But with that storyline out of the way, let's look more into the matchup as a whole. And so Cincinnati is a team that loves to run the ball both with Jerome Ford and Desmond Ridder. And they do this in order to draw the defense up some, and it allows them to take more deep shots over the top through the air. They also love the RPO game where they implement more slants, in routes, out routes, some bubble screens, things like that, in a more traditional RPO type aspect. for a more consistent passing game than obviously just taking deep shots. And then obviously they also implement more standard drop back passes and stuff. It's not to say this is all they do or anything, but what their offense is sort of built around, the structure of their offense is a zone running scheme that, utilizes Desmond Ritter's legs alongside the speed of Jerome Ford, and it also limits the negative matchups they're going to have in the line of scrimmage against elite level teams on average, particularly like they will have against Alabama, where their offensive line is going to be outmatched. And so when you run this zone read kind of scheme with the RPO action behind it and you take more deep shots, it does help to limit the impact that those matchups can have against you. It also allows them to take more of those deep shots out of a familiar looking formation and concept, so as not to sort of tilt their hand that they're going to take a deep shot at that point. However, all of that is predicated on the defense needing to commit numbers to stopping the run and cheating up some. Even if it's just a little bit, just a half step, that allows you to throw over the top of a linebacker on a slant pass, or throw over the top of a safety on a deep post or something like that, or to allow your receiver to get a step on the corner. That is what you need. You need them to commit numbers, particularly in the back end, to help stop your run game, and that's what Cincinnati's done very well all year. But in this matchup particularly, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. I mean, Alabama has an elite level run defense that is far and away the best run defense that Cincinnati will have seen to date. And they will also be facing the best athletes as a whole that they will have seen to this point as well. And I mean, I say this, Alabama's run defense is truly elite. I mean, they average giving up less yards per carry than Georgia's run defense. They're legitimate, elite level run defense. Now, their pass defense is not that level this year. But that run defense is, and it's going to, in my opinion, be even a little bit more exacerbated by the fact that they're going to have physicality mismatches up on the line of scrimmage in all likelihood. With Cincinnati being a group of 5 team, they're just not going to have the same kind of dudes consistently across the line of scrimmage there. And I think that makes that Alabama elite defense even more dangerous and even more elite to watch out for. So there is the potential for Alabama to be able to limit Cincinnati's run game without committing any numbers to stop it other than just the natural box that they're going to run, which would force Desmond Ridder to make elite-level throws consistently just to keep the offense moving, either to make elite-level throws or to extend the play with his legs all the time. The point is it forces Desmond Ridder to play out of his mind if they want to be able to move the ball in Alabama. And now the corner situation here helps Cincinnati out a lot because I feel they will be pretty effective through the air against Alabama. They will likely win some 50-50 balls. They're going to take their deep shots. And if you hit a couple of those, you never know what can happen at that point. And I do, like I said, I think they're going to be a pretty effective offense as far as passing the ball goes, even just not on the deep shots, just a more menial passing game. I think they'll do okay, but I don't think they're going to do enough to just build your entire offense around. They're not going to do, like what Alabama just did to Georgia in the SEC Championship, where they basically abandoned the run and just threw the ball, and it was enough to get them 34 offensive points. I don't think Cincinnati's going to be able to do that in this game. It will be enough to force them to respect it, and I think it can be enough to keep them around and keep the offense afloat so that they don't completely go stagnant. But they're going to need to be able to establish the run. At least, and they don't have to run the ball all over Alabama. They're probably not going to be able to. But they need to at least be able to establish the run enough to force Alabama to cheat up some, to commit some numbers to the box, to respect their run game, to take it seriously enough to give Cincinnati the opportunity to open up their pass game, to take some deep shots, to hit more RPO-type plays. But the question is, can they do it? I mean, I don't know. We're going to have to see. That's why they play the game. But it's a tall task to be able to run on that Alabama defense. And you have a better chance with the zone read scheme that they run. But it's not going to be easy, especially when they're that outmatched up front. And if they can't do that, it's going to make things very difficult for them in the passing game. And now for the Alabama defense in this matchup, they're going to look to control the line of scrimmage with the superior talent and athletes that they have up front in particular. I mean, guys like Will Anderson are going to look to absolutely feast, and it's going to look similar to how Azeez Ojulari did it against Cincinnati last year in the Peach Bowl, where he had a breakout game for Georgia against Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl. He ended up getting to go against a backup tackle for some of that game. I think he had 3 or 4 sacks. He had a forced fumble. He had a safety. He went absolutely crazy, and he completely took over that game in the second half. Will Anderson, and I love Azeez Ojulari, don't get me wrong, Will Anderson is better than Azeez Ojulari. He's noticeably better than Azeez Ojulari. Particularly how Azeez Ojulari was at that point in his progression when he played Cincinnati. And Will Anderson can absolutely be a game wrecker here and completely feast in that backfield and wreak havoc. And you can't let that happen. But the problem is it's not just Will Anderson. I mean, they have so many dudes, even a freshman like a Dallas Turner for Alabama. They have so many dudes. It's going to be a very tall task for Cincinnati to even really compete at an even level on the line of scrimmage. And if Bama's defense can control the line of scrimmage to the ability that they have the potential to, and that allows them to put Cincinnati into obvious passing situations, then Alabama's defense is going to have immense success. I mean, if Cincinnati can't get the run game going enough and they get into 3rd and 7, 8, 9, 10s consistently, Desmond Ritter's going to have a long day because Alabama and Will Anderson, they're going to be able to pin their ears back. They're going to be able to go after him, and it's just not going to be good for Cincinnati at that point. You don't want to be in that situation. They're going to be able to drop more confusing coverages. It opens up a whole Pandora's box of opportunities for the Alabama defense to really, really make life hard for Desmond Ridder. Also, as speaking of Desmond Ridder, he does a lot of good things. I mean, for all the good things he does with his arm and his legs, the problem is that he frequently makes mistakes as well, and he throws interceptions pretty often, or he'll go on a cold streak where he just goes 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out with, incompletion, and that's even against some teams that are noticeably less talented even than they are, and this is a matchup that goes the exact opposite way, where they are the noticeably less talented team. And that is scary for Cincinnati. At least it should be scary for Cincinnati, because if he goes on a cold streak and causes the Cincinnati offense to stall, that will snowball absolutely out of control. You can't put your defense in a situation where you haven't scored in 4 consecutive drives and they have to stop Alabama every time. Georgia did that when they went 2 or 3 drives. I think they went 3 or 4 drives in a row. It was like 3 and out, and then they got like a first down and punted, and Alabama scored on all of their drives off of that, and all of a sudden the game was basically over from that point on. Cincinnati cannot afford to do that. They cannot consistently stall. And that doesn't mean they have to score every time they get the ball, but they have to move the ball, give your defense a breather, burn some clock, establish some form of consistent offense. And Desmond Ridder, it's going to be all on him, to be honest. He's not going to be able to make mistakes. He's not going to be able to throw interceptions, not going to be able to have turnovers and expect to be successful in this game. Overall, though, I feel like the Cincinnati run game will manage to be effective enough to keep the offense afloat, but not enough to fully open the offense up like they want to. I don't think you're going to be able to get Alabama to consistently commit numbers to it, to consistently come up and break their coverage assignments downfield in anticipation of the run game. And I think that's really going to hurt the passing game more than it's going to hurt the running game. And, with the secondary issues at Alabama right now, I think Ridder and Cincinnati should be able to throw the ball with some success, but just not enough to take over the game completely. And Will Anderson could legitimately just turn into a game wrecker here since he can't block him. And I expect they're going to have a game plan to at least somewhat limit and deal with him to some extent to just prevent him from single-handedly dominating this game. But he is such a good player. Sometimes those kind of guys, those kind of players just make plays anyway. And if you get in a situation like that, he could really take over the game. I don't know. Overall, though, I think Cincinnati's going to have an effective but not great offense against the Alabama defense. It's almost going to be entirely predicated on how well they can run the football and how efficient Desmond Ridder can be. If Desmond Ridder can play a Deshaun Watson type of game, then Cincinnati could have huge success on offense. But I just don't see that happening. I'm not the biggest Desmond Ridder fan out there. I don't dislike him by any means. I think he's a very good quarterback. I think he's the second best quarterback in the playoffs. But I don't think he's Deshaun Watson either. And I think in this game, he's going to kind of need to be a Deshaun Watson type if you want to be able to consistently succeed against the Alabama defense, especially if the run game's not rolling for them as well. So, moving on to the Alabama offense versus the Cincinnati defense, and to me, the biggest advantage that Cincinnati has here is that they have legit NFL corners. They have 3 guys in their secondary that are going to be drafted, particularly Ahmad Gardner. He's definitely the best one of that group, and that can match up with a somewhat depleted receiving core in Alabama that is down a guy like a John Mechie, which is a massive loss for Alabama. And it's not just for his on-the-field play, but it's his leadership on the field as well. I think that makes a big difference. But Alabama's depth, especially at receiver, is ridiculous. I mean, you have Ja'Cory Brooks and JoJo Earl and Agiye Hall, and it just, the list of elite-level wide receivers goes on and on and on. And they still have that guy named Jameson Williams as well. And so that is also a problem. I don't know if there's anybody who can just lock down Jameson Williams, especially when he has a guy as good as Bryce Young throwing in the ball. That is really, really a tough ask, because if Bryce Young is on target, which he has been basically all season, he can put some throws in there against a guy like Jameson Williams with his speed that you just really can't defend, regardless of how good you play. They're also, Cincinnati, is also going to need Myjai Sanders to play incredible football for them and get pressure on Bryce Young, because if Bryce Young doesn't get pressured, we've seen what he will do in the SEC championship game against an elite Georgia defense. They didn't get pressure on him, and he went absolutely ballistic, lit the entire defense up, diced up the secondary, and completely took over the game. And Cincinnati will be in a very similar situation to that, despite the fact that I think Cincinnati probably has a little bit better secondary than Georgia. Their front seven isn't near what Georgia's is, and so they have to find a way to manufacture pressure without compromising their coverage down the field. And that's a tall ask, but if they can figure out how to do it, then more power to them. And the depth issue is also a thing. Alabama has so much depth, and is particularly at a position like wide receiver. Whereas Cincinnati, while their depth is very good for a G5 team, it's not, if a Cincinnati starter like an Ahmad Gardner or something goes out for a little while, the guy who's coming in off the bench is not an Ahmad Gardner level player. Whereas for Alabama, accepting guys like a Bryce Young or a Jameson Williams or a Brian Robinson, I guess in this case, just because of the depth issues Bama has at running back. But anyway, accepting guys like that, they really can just kind of roll through guys. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. That's why they are as good as they are. And so that could be a significant issue for Cincinnati going into this game. And you never know if there's going to be injuries or COVID protocol stuff. So that could definitely be a severe problem for Cincinnati. However, I do think that they will hold up pretty well in pass defense for this game. I mean, they have a very good secondary. It is, to me, the hallmark, the calling card, if you will, of this defense. But they're probably still going to give up some explosives, and just the sheer depth that Alabama has across the roster can definitely become an issue in the long run, and Bryce Young is absolutely outstanding, so you're going to have to find a way to get pressure on him, and I don't know if they can. And so, yeah, while I feel very good about Cincinnati's secondary, this is just one of those things where I don't know how well they're going to be able to do. We've seen great offense consistently do better than great defense, and I don't know. I don't want to dive too deep into that, but I'm not confident in Cincinnati's ability to really limit Alabama's offense. I think they'll do fine. They'll do decent. It's not like they're going to get exposed or anything, but I wouldn't expect them to really stop Alabama's passing game completely either. And I think that the even bigger issue that Cincinnati's going to face defensively is that Brian Robinson is going to be back fully healthy behind that absolutely gigantic Alabama offensive line. They are massive, they are outstanding run blockers, and they are going to try to just maul Cincinnati up front and assert their will on them. And, if you look at Brian Robinson in the SEC championship game, you may not be all that impressed. He was basically playing on a freshly pulled hamstring that entire game. He was essentially on one leg. I mean, healthy Brian Robinson this season has been dominant. He's been one of the best running backs in America, And he does it in a powerful and commanding fashion too. He's not going to juke you out too much. He's going to run over your linebacker. He's going to run over your safety. He's going to carry the ball, get hit at the line, and get 6 yards somehow. That is how he runs. You couple that with the Alabama offensive line here, going up against a Cincinnati defense that is going to be much, much smaller than them. They're not going to have seen anything like that before. I mean, it's going to be tough for Cincinnati to hold up, and it's one of those things where, yes, Cincinnati does have a very good defense, but the talent discrepancy at the line of scrimmage with a healthy Brian Robinson behind it is just a real issue, and it's coupled too. Run defense is one of those things where you can only scheme around it so much, you know? If your guys are just getting beat up front, then they're just getting beat up front. There's not a scheme that you can come up with to stop your defensive lineman from getting pushed back off the ball. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, you can scheme around it to some extent, try to run some creative stunts, some twists with your linebackers and stuff like that, but it comes to a point where you just got to win up front in particular, and I don't know if Cincinnati can win consistently here. I would very, very confidently say they won't be able to consistently win against Alabama's running offense. Also, adding on to that, Cincinnati's base defense is a 3-3-5 look. Now, obviously, they run multiple looks. When I say a base defense is a 3-3-5, that is what the majority of their defense runs out of. That's what it's molded around. That is not the only defense they run. But with the 3-3-5, we have seen it, in multiple teams, run by multiple teams and against multiple teams. It struggles when facing, downhill power running offenses, and Alabama in particular, even this year, has had massive success on the ground against similarly schemed teams. Even a team like an Arkansas or an Ole Miss both run 3-3-5 type defenses. They're not as good as Cincinnati's defense, but at least up front, their talent is somewhat comparable. And it's just Alabama ran all over those teams, and I don't know if Cincinnati's going to be any different. I think they'll fare a little bit better. In particular, they'll fare better than Ole Miss did, but I don't know if it's enough to really turn the tide in the game. I think Bama definitely gets a solid edge there, and I think that's what they're going to try to do. I think Alabama's going to come out and just try to run the ball at them a lot. And if they can force Cincinnati to commit numbers to the run game, which I think they're going to very easily be able to, then all of a sudden your secondary has to win one-on-ones all day. And they don't just have to win the one-on-one for a little bit. They have to hold up in coverage for a long time if you can't get pressure on Bryce Young. And Bryce Young is great at extending plays and breaking out of the pocket. And I don't know. It's not a great matchup for them, in my opinion. And I don't think that their run defense is going to be able to do anything with Alabama's rushing offense. But if Cincinnati can force Alabama to pass by limiting the run game without compromising their secondary, without compromising their pass defense, then they can definitely limit Alabama's success and keep them under 30 points. But to be honest, I just don't see them being able to do it with much consistency. I mean, I think if they're going to be able to stop the run, they're going to have to commit numbers. And if you commit numbers as good as Cincinnati's secondary is, I just don't see it holding up consistently over the game. I very, very confidently expect Alabama to break 30 here. There is, Cincinnati has the capability to hold them under 30. But if Alabama shows up and does what they're capable of doing and what I think they're going to come out and try to do, it seems more likely than not to me that Alabama will break 30 points in this game. Now, the biggest X factor for me in this game is just what Bama team is going to show up. I mean, we don't know at this point. And I don't even mean them overlooking Cincinnati or anything, because Nick Saban is not going to allow that to happen. They're not going to overlook someone in a playoff semifinal game. But if you look at Alabama as a team this year, look at their schedule, they've had multiple games, and I mean multiple games, where they have not played well. They have played pretty uncharacteristically bad. You look at the Auburn game, they played terrible. You look at Texas A&M, they didn't play terrible, but they didn't play good either. Arkansas, they gave up 35 points and over 300 passing yards to KJ Jefferson. And you can name other games too. Even the Florida game, they only beat a 6-win Florida team by 2. And now that Florida team at that point was a little bit better than they are now, but still, that's not a good win. That's not the same Alabama team that showed up against Georgia in the SEC championship. And if the Alabama team that played Auburn, for example, shows up, then Cincinnati has a very good shot to win this game. Cincinnati is a very good team. I don't want this video to seem like I'm just hating on Cincinnati. Most of this video is just to talk about how good Alabama is, because Alabama is, in my opinion, currently the best team in America. And it's not a slight to Cincinnati in the slightest to say that they're going to have trouble matching up with Alabama. Everybody has trouble matching up with Alabama. But, if, like I said, if the Bama team that showed up against Auburn or Florida even comes into this game, Cincinnati will do very well. But if the Bama team that showed up against Georgia, if that's who comes to play against Cincinnati, Cincinnati's not going to be good enough to beat them. They're not. They're not. I wish they were. I promise you I do. I'm tired of Alabama dominating, but that team that Alabama fielded in the SEC championship game, I don't know if anybody can beat Alabama when they play that good. Cincinnati, I really don't think can. The talent discrepancy is too vast. It's just not a good matchup for them. Also, haven't even talked about the fact that you're giving Nick Saban multiple weeks to prepare for a team, and it's hard to pick against Nick Saban to begin with, but then you give him almost a month to prep for one team. How do you in good faith bet against him or bet on him showing up with an unprepared team? It just doesn't seem likely to me. So, in conclusion, I feel like Cincinnati is a very deserving team who is a legitimately good, playoff caliber team that has a chance in this game. I don't want it to feel like they don't have a chance, like there's no path to victory. There are paths to victories. Their biggest path to victory, you got to win the turnover battle. You have to have Desmond Ridder play a near perfect game, and you need to be able, and to do that, I feel like you need to be able to establish your run game on offense. You have to be able to get pressure on Bryce Young to limit and help your secondary out and to limit the passing game. And when you do that, you can't compromise your run defense and just let Brian Robinson run all over you. And yeah, that sounds pretty easy. Like, oh yeah, if you just do those things, you'll win. But I assure you, it is incredibly difficult to actually pull any of that off, especially to pull all of that off at the same time. And Bama's injury situation, definitely something to watch, particularly at corner. And if Bama shows up with some of the inconsistencies that we've seen from them that they've had all year, then Cincinnati has a very real shot. And, how much does losing a guy like Bill O'Brien and their offensive line coach, how much does that hurt you for practice? They'll be there for the game, but you lose, a week or two of practice with them. How much does that impact you? I don't know. I pretty confidently trust Nick Saban, have him ready to go, have him prepared. And so, yeah, Alabama is the better team overall. They're the better team in basically every facet of the game, and that explains the 14-point spread. I mean, Cincinnati is a 14-point dog for a reason. And so for my score prediction, I'm going to take Alabama 38, Cincinnati 21. And I just think that the Alabama offense is just far too potent and balanced. With a healthy Brian Robinson that's back in the game now, you get Bryce Young at quarterback, Jamison Williams dominating at wide receiver, and you're going up against a Cincinnati defense that is very good, but it's outmatched. It's physically outmatched in this game. They don't have the same level of athlete, and particularly when you factor in depth, line of scrimmage play, and with the 3-3-5 they run against Alabama's rushing offense, I just don't see them holding up well defensively against Alabama. I also think that Cincinnati's going to have success offensively, particularly through the air in this game. And I think the running game is going to be decently effective as well, just not enough to carry the day to get them out of the 20s. They might get to 24 or 28 even. I don't see them breaking into the 30s against this defense, though. This defense is too good against the run, which is what Cincinnati's offense is predicated on. I think Desmond Ridder is going to end up making at least one costly mistake that's going to turn the momentum late in the game. As much as I like Desmond Ridder, again, I don't think he's Deshaun Watson, and I don't think that's a slight on Cincinnati or Desmond Ridder. There's not very many, if any, other Deshaun Watsons out there, but that's the kind of performance they're going to need from him to win this game. I don't see it happening. I think Cincinnati's likely going to keep the game close till towards the end, but nobody's ever really going to see him as a true threat to win the game outright. Bama will control it most of the way, and Cincinnati will hang around till towards the end of the game where it might start to separate. But With all of that being said, this is just my opinion. Game could go either way. Let me know what you guys think about this matchup down below in the comment section. Are you picking Cincinnati in the upset? I'm going to roll with the Tide on this one. Also, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead, leave a like on the video. If you've made it this far, you might as well at this point. Also, subscribe to the channel for more college football content in the future, as I will consistently be putting out college football content here on the channel going forward. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.